Is er minder reactie geweest op Frans praat? A very warm welcome to you all, and on behalf of Wyatt and Toy and SPB, we want to extend a very warm welcome to Colonel Chris Wyatt, retired US Army, to Upington. Chris, a warm welcome to you. We're glad to have you here again. It's the fourth time we've had Chris here with us. First time was in Upington, second time in Victoria East, third time again Upington, the fourth time in Upington. Chris, honored to have you. Thank you. Before we open, let's give us another hand. Before we start, we're going to do the right thing. I'm going to ask Peter to come forward. Peter Tron, just to bless the event. Thank you, Peter.
Net om daarom te helpen met die kolonel, de Engels. Hij verstaat Afrikaans. Ga ik niet in Engels doen, zoals jullie bijgeloofden. Maar ik wil doen. Father, we thank you today to have a distinguished guest from far to visit us. We ask that you lead these proceedings. We ask that you bless us with wisdom. And Lord, as the word says, those that have got ears, let them hear. And may this message also go far and wide and touch our people's hearts. We thank you that we've got this opportunity to honor you as well in what we do. Therefore, we thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Peter. Just a couple of admin things. Arrangements, your cell phones, you can switch them off or put them on silent. It's important. Bathrooms, if you need to go to the bathroom, just do the door sharp right. Bathrooms are there. I'm going to then call Adrian forward just to open the floor. Thank you, Adrian. Archie, could you come forward then just to introduce the gifts? Thank you. You and Adrian. Where's the main word, Adrian?
Good afternoon from my side. We would just like to use this opportunity to say a few thank yous and words of appreciation. And then we would like to hand over to Colonel Chris Wyatt to get towards Upington. First towards the Protea Hotel. First towards the Protea Hotel for making this room available for us, as well as in specific Ivy. I don't think she's here. For all the efforts that she has done, making and helping with the arrangements this morning, supporting Estelle also for everything that you have done to make it happen. Everybody that has helped this morning, all right, to get the whole venue set. Thank you very much for that. Then, yeah, everybody. Actually, before I get to that, Anthony, are you here? She's not here. Okay, but in her absence, we want to say thank you to her as well for the contribution towards the podium. We appreciate that. She has sponsored that for us. All right, and then everybody that was coming from far. I know there's people here from Springbok, Cape Town, from Namibia. All the effort that you have done to get over here, thank you very much. And we wish you a safe drive back to your homes. All right, we would like to present quickly to Chris, towards you. Yeah, please don't stand next to us. 2 tokens of appreciation, all right, for coming to Upington. It's already, as Rob has said, the 4th time. We appreciate really your involvement over here. The first token of appreciation, all right, is a knife sharpener. This will be your first and last one. This is a really good one. Yes, all right, and it's also having Kurt's name on it on this side, and on the other side, displayed side on the look of the scanner. So, yeah, we would like to hand you this one.
That's very kind of you. I haven't even done anything yet. I'm already getting gifts and I haven't done anything.
It's waiting, it's coming. All right, then the second token. All right, and this one is really a good one. They call this bottle of wine is dog. All right, and it's referring back to Doc Craven. And yes, we are going to watch the Springboks now today again. So it's referring back to Danny Craven, Doc Danny Craven, which is actually called Mr. Rugby, or actually the father of, no, I will not say the father of the South African rugby. Born in 1910, he also played for the Springboks. I think it was from 1931 until 1938. Here, close to the 1950, he became the president of the board, first coach. And in 1956 until 1993, okay, was the president of the South African rugby. He had a lot of influence, all right, on the South African rugby. For those that I was now checking quickly, it is today the 569th or 570th game that the Springboks is going to participate in. Sorry, I don't want to go into the Springboks itself. Just a little bit of background on Dr. Danny Craven. This one is worth a lot, all right, and I'm going to go buy one for you.
Well, given last week I was at Ellis Park, I think we'll need to crack this and drink it before the game just to get through tonight's game. I'm a little nervous, but yes, I'm familiar with Dr. Danny Craven. Of course, Craven Week is named after him. He is an epic legend in South African rugby. Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ozzy. All right, before we start with the talk show, just to let you know the rugby starts at 5. We'll be watching outside in the courtyard. There's a table there. The table is there for certain members, but we're all going to be in that area. There'll be a cash bar also on the outside, and then we'll start eating around at 7 o'clock. All right, I'm going to hand you then over to Bernard to carry on with the talk show. Enjoy and also to take part. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Do we only have one?
There's 2 that work.
Third one. Is this one working?
It should be working.
Doesn't sound like
It was working.
This one's still working.
There you go.
It doesn't work simultaneously, so once you're done, you put it on mute, then you can speak.
Just mute the middle section. Or just turn it off. I'll just turn it off each time.
On and mute.
I think a man must realize when you read the tiring names, because everybody else is assisting. Very nice. You had to come all the way from the United States to show me how to put out the bar at the bottom. But anyway, guys, everybody who's come here to attend today, welcome to all of you. I know for some of you it's very difficult if you are speaking in English today. But I know there's some people that speaks the tongue deliciously. But yes, from my side as well, always good to see you. I hope to spend a little bit more time before we started with you. But as always, there is the devil in the business that confuse everything and cause havoc with all the planning and the stuff that we had to prepare and put up with. But really a great turnout today. Thank you guys. I see some of the tour members, some people from Namibia today, also visiting. Maybe next year we should go to Namibia and visit there as well. But their rugby isn't so good. But they're fishing now. Chris, yeah, from my side, welcome once again. And I want to start today. You sent me a video yesterday where he was on the beach. And you said that the United States is about, or very possibly, going to bring down the hammer onto South Africa. You care to elaborate a bit on that one?
Well, sure, Ben. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to be here again. I always feel very welcome wherever we do this at. And ek verstaan julle kom van ver, so I appreciate it. It's quite. Did I mess that up? I didn't prepare that. It just came out of my head. So maybe after the wine it'll be a little more accordingly sounding. Anyway, but thank you all for coming. I do appreciate it an awful lot. This means an awful lot to me doing this and speaking to folks here. It's really amazing. So before I go any further, I do have to say that the first time we did this in 2022 at the other hotel, after the live stream, people were sending all kinds of WhatsApp notes, and I was confused. Apparently, we weren't the star of the show, but my boots were. That's all they talked about were these boots throughout the show. All the chat was about these boots. I'm not really sure what's so special about them, but I figured I'd wear them again today just in case people want to talk about them. Okay, so he's looking at his fellas. So the thing I said is that there's two aspects to this. The first is that the Trump administration last year, when Corny Muller, as a member of parliament, not as the party leader of Free Front Plus, went to DC, the U.S. administration gave him a list of asks, not demands, but asks. We would like the South African government to address the following 5 items. And the fifth one's disputed and really isn't important because only the U.S. government and South Africa really know what it is. I think I know, but it's not important for now. But the 4 asks, including to publicly disavow Kill the Boer, and then, of course, the BEE stuff. The U.S. government said, we need you to address these things. Otherwise, we're not going to engage with you. We've cut the aid off. We've opened a refugee program for the abuse happening to racial minorities, in particular Afrikaners. And so that was 16 months ago. There's been no action. The South African government has made no genuine effort whatsoever to go to Washington. For a long time, they didn't even have an ambassador there. But now, I don't think they have an ambassador now. Now they have a Fire there. Rolf Meyer, the Fire, is in the United States. And he's trying to convince the administration to do things the way that the ANC wants it to be done. While he may be treated with respect and given office calls, he's not going to get anywhere. It's just not going to happen. The Trump administration is not blind to what's happening in South Africa. And we had previous administrations that weren't blind, but they were willing accomplices. They were unwilling to state anything. Trump is the first one to actually take action. But 16 months is a long time. And I would argue that one of the reasons why we haven't seen any action to date is that if you're paying attention to U.S. affairs and geopolitics, you'll know that Trump has been a little bit busy with Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, and Democrats. So, there's a lot of threats out there. Notice I did say Democrats as a threat. A lot of threats out there towards geopolitical interests and our national security. And so that has been the focus. But I know, without any doubt, that there's a big push to take action against South Africa, and particularly ANC and members of the government. And what that will mean, how that plays out, can be any number of ways. Now, in addition to that, on Monday this week, Scott Bessent, who's our Treasury Secretary, said that any country that does trade with Iran will be hit with secondary sanctions. South Africa has a little bit of trade with Iran, but even 10 rands is going to be too much for Scott Bessent. So South Africa will likely get some sort of sanctions coming from that very soon. I'm not sure when, but that will be probably within the next few weeks, maybe the next couple months. But as far as a hammer falling, I don't think that's a hammer. I just think that's the thing winding up. The hammer will be if it's targeted sanctions against leaders in the African National Congress and or members of the government And it would be similar to the travel restrictions and the banking account freezing and things that they've done in Zimbabwe, which a lot of people say, well, it's not working in Zimbabwe. That's not the point. If the U.S. government actually sanctions members of South Africa's government, that's going to send shockwaves around the world. It's not just going to affect South Africa. That's huge. Zimbabwe is one thing, but South Africa is quite different. And I think that that may be coming in the next few months. I'm not senior from Wyatt, I'm not making a prediction here, but my sense is, having talked to people in DC and elsewhere, that this may be not that far away. Even though they're focused on other issues, like I said, Iran and Gaza, Ukraine, China, Democrats, the Trump administration has lots of time to also focus on South Africa. And quite frankly, Bennett and Gillett, the thing is, last year it was deeply insulting what the South African government did when they went to DC. I'm sure many of you probably watched that, and hopefully you watched my broadcast where I enjoyed popcorn during the whole thing, watching it unfold. It was like a comedy hour. And I think the most insulting thing that happened there was when Ramaphosa leaned forward and said, "Mr. President, did they tell you what this is? I've never seen this." Of course, he's referring to the light crosses on the road in Normandy when Glenn and Dieter Rafferty were brutally tortured, butchered, murdered. Of course, Ramaphosa saw those flags. I was 9,000 miles away, and I saw that unfold live. So Ramaphosa knew about that, and Trump knows Ramaphosa knew about it. Also, and I'll wrap up here shortly because there's a danger of me running all the way to the Springboks game with the microphone. So one more thing. The thing about this is that South African government acts like the U.S. government doesn't know what's going on. Well, that's delusional. The U.S. government knows what's going on in South Africa, and they've known for a long time. Also, the problems with South Africa predate Trump. If you want to blame Trump, it's all about Trump. It's not about Trump. The South African government has allowed private corporations to train Chinese fighter pilots to shoot down NATO aircraft using NATO former pilots, American pilots. They've allowed that same organization, the Test Flight Academy, to ship illegally U.S. simulators to China in violation of agreements. They've slapped 70% tariffs on our poultry products. They've refused to sign an Article 98 waiver back around 2001 for the Rome Statute, the International Criminal Court, which meant that they would be obliged to extradite Americans if they were illegitimately charged by the ICC. So this goes back a long time, and it's built to a crescendo. There are people when Kusatu and the ANC went to the U.S. last year before Ramaphosa did, they're usually greeted with great friendliness by the Congressional Black Caucus. The Congressional Black Caucus, much to Kusatu's surprise, didn't want to hear their excuses. Even the black members of Congress had had enough of the BS coming out of Pretoria and out of Cape Town. So I think they were a bit surprised. At this point, I think that the ANC is whistling past the cemetery and not realizing what's coming. That's not a threat. That's just an analysis. I think it's analysis. I think it's not too far down the road. And that will be the initial strike. Sanctions, secondary sanctions, and then the other strike would be if they start targeting key members. That doesn't mean it's over. That just means the first round, the first volley. So, you know how it is, any artillerymen in the room? Can I get a show of hands, any artillerymen? There's at least one over there. Two? Okay. All right, so you have to zero in the target, right? You get that first round, register it, okay, and then fire for effect. Well, fire for effect will follow afterwards, I believe.
Yes. See. Francis, y'all.
Okay, so
Chris, what you are saying is of course, is a serious situation for South Africa. And I think that the government probably have the attitude that they're going to outweigh and outlive Trump. And that eventually in another 2-3 years there will be a new government. And like so many other people probably think that the Democrats will come into power again. But even I'm a little bit worried about that, that it might happen. Just quickly, what do you think is the broader outlook of the ordinary voter in the United States in as far as Republicans versus Democrats is concerned?
All right, so Bennett, let me address it this way. The average voter in America is like the voter in most countries around the world. When it comes down to brass tacks and what really matters, people vote one way. They talk about politics, they talk about LGBTQ, they talk about foreign policy. This is what it comes down to, pocketbook issues. People vote when they're unemployed against city governments, when interest rates are high against city governments, when they have less money in their pocket against city governments. When they're, and this is not fat shaming, it's just a phrase, when they're fat, dumb, and happy, when people are content and they have money in their pocket and life is improving or steady or getting better, they tend to vote the status quo. Now, America has 4.1% unemployment nationwide. Wow, there's nowhere in South Africa 4% unemployment. 4.1% unemployment. Household income has risen every year Trump's been president, including last year. The U.S. is reducing its trade deficit, jobs are being created. And in a normal situation, that would mean that the Republicans would probably continue to be in government. But it's the norm for a president, particularly a sitting duck president, which is essentially what Trump is now, because he only has 2 years left. A lame duck, not sitting duck. Sitting duck is going to be a target. I meant lame duck. It's for a lame duck president, it is normal to lose control of the House and or the Senate in a midterm election. That's just the way politics goes in America for the past 50 years. The Democrats seem to think that they're on the rise. They're gaining ground. But there's two things that kind of throw that into flux now. The first is that now I find this immoral, bankrupt, and inappropriate gerrymandering, redistricting is taking place. They create these artificial districts where a town over here has a little sliver of like 2 kilometers wide, you come down to a big grouping over here, just to group like constituencies together. That's immoral and bankrupt. Both parties do it. This time in California, the Democrats did it to basically wipe out any chance for Republicans to be in Congress from there. But the Republicans did it in Texas and in many other states. And at the moment, it's likely that the Republicans will gain 9 seats from that redistricting. If they hold the other seats that they have, which many of them they will because incumbents tend to win, that would mean they retain the House, which the Democrats thought they had locked up just a couple months ago. And they thought that the Iran war would be the death knell for Trump, but it hasn't been so far. The other thing is that they had one of their democratic socialists, these wackadoodle lunatics who need to be taken out and introduced to a soundbox for about 2 hours. These idiots, they're just absolute crazy people. They've been winning some Democratic primaries in New York, in Buffalo, in New York City, and a few other places around the country. And so the Democrats thought that, hey, we're going to go further left politically, so that we're just crap crazy. And they thought they were going somewhere. But then 2 weeks ago in Wisconsin, Francesca Hong, who was the candidate for governor there, a radical leftist lunatic, Democratic Socialist America, she was expected to win the race. But a black Democrat, who's a centrist, a moderate, I would actually vote for this guy if I had a choice between them, he entered the race 4 weeks before the election. The first poll after a week, she was leading by 22 points in the polls. I mean, that's almost a given. She's going to win. He defeated her. The Democrats are scrambling now. Is our Democratic Socialist agenda the right path? Are we connecting with voters? So they have withdrawn resources from 6 Senate races in the South that they thought they could win. No more money is being poured into it. They're putting money into a couple races up north, like New Hampshire and a couple other places. That tells me that Democrats are nervous and that it's possible the Republicans will retain the House and Senate. But with U.S. politics, it can be a crapshoot. So what I would say is that I believe that the Republicans will retain the House, probably the Senate, and maybe pick up a seat or two. But so there could be an October surprise that changes everything. And beyond that, I think that the key thing here is that I agree with you. Before I get back to you, it's your show. Before I get back to you, I would agree with you that the ANC thinks they can outweight Trump. They think, oh, he'll be gone. This is just a blip. It's not a blip. Washington is pissed off at the ANC, not just Trump. And at this stage, if the election were held today, my prediction, and I'll put my senior fundamental cap on for this one, and freely admit that I believe that not J.D. Vance, but rather Marco Rubio will be the next U.S. president. Marco Rubio is the child of refugees who fled communist Cuba. He gets refugees, and he is very angry at South Africa. So I think that we'll see even more pain coming towards South Africa if something is done, assuming Rubio becomes president. But I think right now that the Republicans, despite everything that's going on, actually have a good chance of retaining everything.
Yeah, you touched on the refugee status. I don't want to go into that now. I think there's some other guys that might ask you questions on that. But I read somewhere on X that all refugees, the processes has been temporarily stopped. Is that true?
I know that's not true. What happens is you often get people that don't understand the process, and they read something and they believe they know the answer. So Briefly, which is a South African website, published an article in response to a news report, and that's fine, that's their prerogative, but their assessment was completely wrong. The Trump administration has suspended all immigrant visa processing for people around the world. Refugees are not immigrants. I know they do immigrate, but illegally they're not immigrants. They're getting refuge. They're being saved from something. They're being given succor and safety. And so that doesn't change. The refugee processing is continuing. I suspect there'll be refugees on the flight with me going home to the United States when I fly home. I hope so anyway. It'd be kind of cool to hang out with them on the flight after a year of this whole thing going on. But every day, South Africans are leaving the country either on their own volition to move to Canada or UK or Australia, about 82 per day. And it's not just white South Africans, it's blacks and coloreds and Indians are also leaving if they can get out. And on top of that, the refugee program, and those numbers fluctuate up and down. But no, the program hasn't stopped, it's continuing. Trust me, if it was stopping, I'd probably be the first person to inform people, but it's not stopped. And I have confirmed that, and also know every day I receive WhatsApps from people I don't even know who get my number, and then they want to tell me that they've landed in Richfield, Minnesota, or Atlanta, Georgia, or they're in Maryland. And of course, my first sentence to them is welcome to America. But yeah, it's continuing each and every day, so it's still going on. The program has not stopped at this moment, and it seems highly unlikely, especially given the transience of the ANC. So that's the problem with X, that's the problem with Facebook, that's the problem with WhatsApp groups. A lot of people that don't know what they're talking about post things, and it gets spread around. And you know, it's like the comments. If you tell a lie often enough, it becomes the truth.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I actually want to move on, but there's a difference between a refugee and an immigrant. And a lot of people try to use the refugee way to get out of South Africa, but they actually want to immigrate. So if you wasn't directly negatively impacted by unjust practices in South Africa, and even further prosecution or what else, then you are not actually a refugee, and then the government, the United States government, can actually refuse to take you as a refugee, but that doesn't necessarily mean you cannot legally immigrate to the United States. It's more the conditions which people are not fulfilling who want to use the refugee route, but actually should apply for immigration. Correct?
Yeah, you're onto something there. Bennett. So there are unfortunately what I would call some destination shoppers that are involved who glommed onto the U.S. refugee program. So that's a problematic issue. 10,590 South Africans have relocated to the United States from May 12th of last year when the first 59 arrived through July 31st this year. On the 6th, because they don't release the statistics, and they do it on the 5th unless it's a weekend or holiday, and this year we have Labor Day, so it'll come like on the 6th or 7th. So those stats will come out and show how many in August, but before August it was 10,590 not over. No doubt there are some destination shoppers amongst that 10,500. And that's unfortunate because some of these are people who have not suffered past persecution and have no legitimate concern about future persecution, but they were able to tell a convincing story when they went through. I would say the number is not that high, but there are some. Recently, someone told me their neighbor said, yeah, we're in the refugee program. We're going over, we got our tickets. We'll see you in 8 months. See you in 8 months. It's something. You have to go for 5 years. No, we're just going to go over to America and check it out and see if we like it and we're coming back. That's a destination shopper. That's an abuse of the program. If the U.S. government, I don't know who they are, but if I find their case number, I'll share it with the U.S. government because those people are taking a slot for someone who's really being persecuted or has a genuine fear of future persecution. But that is true. That does happen. And there is a distinction. Again, if you want to immigrate, then go ahead and do it. But it's a long, lengthy, expensive process. The immigration program, or not immigration, the refugee program is a much quicker process, but it's not painless. There's an awful lot you got to go through, and a lot of people are becoming ineligible for various reasons, and more than I anticipated. Some of it because of past criminal conduct, some of it because of affiliation, some of it because I had a guy contact me after the first letters came out on June 30th. He said, Colonel Wyatt, we got the letter last night. My wife and I both have Irish passports. Those are safe haven passports. Now, I wouldn't go live in Ireland right now. I think Ireland has lost to Western civilization or about to gone completely, but the U.S. government uses it as a safe place to go. So if you both have a passport, you're not going anywhere. That should in self-evident. You're wasting your time. Another guy approached me when I was in Wyatt a couple of days ago, and he said, Colonel Wyatt, can I talk to you for a minute? I said, sure. He said, listen, I'm going to tell them I smoke weed when I go in. I said, okay, you're going to tell them you smoked weed? No, I smoke weed. Okay, you do realize that THC stays in your system for 90 days. If you turn up positive in your analysis, they're going to make you take another test. And after that, you're going to be deemed a habitual drug user. So if you're smoking weed, you shouldn't be doing it if you want to go to America. They're not going to let you go. Anyway, there is a distinction between the two, and there are some destination shoppers, and I think these people are shameful, absolutely shameful. Sorry not to go on, but I live in a country with 330 million people, and 30 million criminals have invaded our country, so over 350 million people. We have half as many murders per year as South Africa. And in my entire life, I'm 59 again this year, and I'll be that way for several years. I have never known an American who's been murdered. 6 of my friends in South Africa have been murdered. I don't live in South Africa. I come here a couple times a year, and my affiliation with South Africa goes back about 30 years, but that's sick. Something is wrong. That's not normal. And maybe afterwards I'll tell a longer story about the time I was in the airport in Paris, and all the South Africans said I was wrong, and then they all showed me the scars where they were stabbed and shot and all these other things, but that's not normal. And it's heartbreaking for me to talk about this. Those are people who are being persecuted. And I was at Menlyn the other day, and this lady, Colonel Wyatt, hi, my husband loves your rugby. I said, well, great, please sit down and have a cup of coffee. And so I sat down. She was with her daughter, she's going through matric. And I said, why aren't you matric today? She said, I'm not writing exams, that's in a couple of days. And she knew an ID card, and there was an office in Menlyn, Detroit. So we're talking, and her daughter applied to Stellenbosch, top marks, denied. She's white, she can't go. So she applied to CTU or something, whatever, CCUT in Cape Town, which is a technical school. And then these retards burned down the campus because they wanted handouts the day before, so she can't go there now. She wants to just be a radiologist. She can't. That's heartbreaking. I'm sorry for the profanity, but that's bullshit. This is unacceptable. The world needs to know. So yeah, there's a distinction. I'm sorry, a little bit off track there, but I think that was important to share. The destination shoppers, I think, are morally reprehensible and selfish.
And now I can't remember what it was.
Not because I talked to him, because we need the mic to work.
No, good. But shockingly, you talk about the people that have been murdered. You got 6 friends that's been murdered here in South Africa. And people in South Africa learn that there is nothing wrong. It has become normal to have murder, to have violence, to have everything that is against our culture as Western people. We are accepting it as normal. And that's a big danger for us. Because if we can't get the people awake for the situation in South Africa, we are just going to slide down further and further and further. You look at the political situation, you are talking about it. I've just earlier said, told a guy this morning, that I think you are perhaps the one person who knows more about South Africa than myself and most of other South Africans, because you are studying intensely the patterns, the political situation. Do you really believe that there is any way how South Africa can be politically safe, even if another political party comes into power, do you think it's possible to turn the boat around without major international support, if we will get the international support?
Well, that's a tough one. I thought it was going to be easy questions today. I'm going to have to unpack that one. So first off, I don't want to be a depressing person. What I will tell you is this. If I were king for a day and had the authority, I could turn the ship around instantaneously. The damage has been so catastrophic to society, to social norms, to race relations, to economics, that it takes very little to right this ship. First off, if I were king for a day, BEE would be gone, and that alone would spark growth. The green shoots that they talk about all the time, these paid talking heads and these government operatives who claim that the economy is growing. By the way, your economy is growing at 0.5%. GDP at 0.5% per annum this year, and probably lower because oil prices spiking because of the Iran conflict, which is not your fault. It's Iran's fault that we engaged. So inflation is running at close to 4% in South Africa, and population growth is just under 1%. So the country is becoming demonstrably poorer by the day. You have more mouths to feed, and the economy is not growing to keep up with inflation. So your rand is worth less every day, even though it's risen against dollars, it's still worth less. So it can be turned around, but it takes a political will and it takes political involvement. In 2021, when the municipal elections occurred, I interviewed 7 party leaders and I spoke to 45 candidates for office. I told them that, I told my viewers that you need to get out and vote. And I got a lot of apathy, particularly for white South Africans. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Black people always vote for the ANC. Well, we've seen that Black people won't always vote for the ANC because they've become more and more popular. In fact, I think the ANC is as popular as syphilis at this point. Just right about up there with syphilis and chlamydia, on the popularity chart. Just saying. Anyway. So I think that that it is possible to turn around, but right now, the way things stand, without civic engagement in a more forceful way, I'm not talking about forced alarms, I'm talking about more active involvement by people in the civil sector and the municipal elections on November 4th, unless something is done drastic this time, I don't know if South Africa can survive to 2029 when the next election is. One thing I've noticed this trip anecdotally, and it's anecdotal, so there's no demonstrative evidence of it, it's just my observation. There are places with large white populations in South Africa, like Pretoria normally, and parts of Joburg and Cape Town. But I've gone places on this trip that I'm used to seeing. I mean, I go all over. I go to Shoshaguve, I go to Alexandria, I've been to Chatsworth, I go to Khayelitsha. Yes, I know I'm crazy. And Mondenberg. I go all over. So I interact with South Africans, black, white, brown, all the country. And the places where lots of white folks hang out, just historically, like Menlyn Mall in Pretoria, used to be 85% white people walk around the mall. My couple trips there this time, it was 70% black. Almost no white people there to be found. I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just saying that's a real change. Where are all the white people going? The Western Cape, a lot of them. Others leave the country. And then, Linwood Bridge, where Rob and I hung out and had coffee a couple years ago, was like 95% white folks there. This time it's about 20% black. I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying there's a serious change taking place here. I think the country, though, can be saved, but it's going to take a Herculean effort. Because the people in charge, in my view, are like locusts. They're not all parties. They will denude the landscape, they will eat everything, they'll move on to the next spot. The carnage is everywhere. There's one refinery left in South Africa, and for a period of several months, there were no refineries. That's one in Cape Town. You're paying a lot more for petrol and kerosene and jet fuel because it has to be refined before it gets here. So the smelters are all gone. You used to have 19 iron smelters in this country. There's one, and it's about to go under. Your aluminum smelter in KZN was saved by America's Alcoa. Otherwise, it would go under. And now the Chinese are eating your lunch with their crappy cars coming in here all over the place. And while they put tariffs and barriers on our cars coming in, Europeans, there's a lot of bad news. There are no green shoots. But again, it can be saved. But people have to get engaged. Go vote. Go vote. When we were in Pretoria East a couple years ago, I was asked a similar question. And people are like, we're such a small minority. How do we survive this? And I said, well, raise your hands if you're under 40. Now go home and make babies. Okay? In 1911, the population of South Africa was less than 5 million. Over 1 million of that were white. over 22% of the population was white. As a percentage. Today, it's about 7%. And that's not because white people haven't reproduced. We went from 1 million to over 5 million. If you count the South Africans living abroad, it's probably closer to 6 million white South Africans. But the black population of this country has gone from 3 million to 46 million. So go make babies.
Chris, that's very good advice, but don't give it to this lot of old people.
We'll try it.
Say weer. Ja, Frans.
Let's not talk about it.
But, Chris, Elon Musk. You know, he's fairly upset surrounding the whole Starlink issue in South Africa. I must say Starlink works wonderful. We have been to Mozambique and the Starlink was up and running when we were across the border on the other side. But on this side, nothing. And but Elon Musk, what kind of effort do you think or role can he play behind the scenes? Because he sometimes say, I will do things like he's now doing in Britain. He's very, very on the social media in Britain. The tax he's receiving in Europe. And initially said a lot about the Starlink, the situation, the political requirements, BEE in South Africa, and then he actually went quiet. And I can't believe that he is just leaving it. But I know he and Trump is big buddies. But there's still one big question coming later today, which I will ask you. In the meanwhile, Francis, did anything come up?
Do we have questions from online?
Yeah, there is some questions that is coming through.
Okay.
Francis, you did not show you from me.
I'm impressed he doesn't need reading glasses.
Fancy bananas for his stuff,
Okay, this is a question from George de Lange, Chris. What's the possibility of civil war in the US? If any, what's the timeline and what might be the triggers? Do you think the military bases of the US will reduce or disappear in the Middle East? But that's actually two separate questions. I think we did discuss the civil war issue about during your previous visit here. But I think, yeah, it's a good point to discuss it. I think it's less now than during the Biden era.
All right, so to answer this question directly, my statement is that the chances of civil war in America are zero. Zero, there's no chance. Most of what people hear is propaganda from the media. So I met with the young lady, I stayed on a dairy farm in Midland, Kansas City the other night, and she's 22, she teaches, and she came to dinner with her parents and I at their house. She said to me, because she's a refugee lady, she said, Colonel Wyatt, what about all these school shootings? I said, okay, all right, you're a teacher. It's incumbent upon you to think critically, not to be critical, but to think critically. All right, how big is America? How many schools there? 200,000 schools in America? How many school shootings have there been? Any one is too many. But there are more Shabin mass murders in South Africa every week than there are school shootings in America, probably every year, to be honest. And so you have to put things in perspective. It's the same thing when it comes to this topic. There was tension in America when we had this conversation before, when Biden was pretending to be president. It was pretty impressive. You know, I liked how he stumbled up the stairs going to Air Force One and forgot I was the president. Okay. So, no, the chances are zero. There's no civil war coming to America. It's not going to happen. The society is too robust. The constraints against that happening are too strong, and I don't think that's going to happen. Not in my lifetime. We'll see. let's hope not. And then we've already had a civil war, and it was quite deadly. And some of us actually remember, you know, a long time ago. Of my 8 great-great-grandfathers alive during the Civil War, 7 served in uniform, all of them for defending the institution of slavery. So it's kind of an issue that's important to me. As far as U.S. bases in the Middle East, I would say that I don't think they're going anywhere. I thought maybe we would close all our bases in Iraq at some point. That hasn't happened. So I don't think we're certainly not leaving Bahrain or Qatar or Saudi Arabia where we have access. That's not going to happen. Saudi Arabia is, for good or bad, a very strong U.S. ally and has been for a long time. Never mind their flirtation with BRICS. That's not real. That's window dressing. They are an incredibly strong U.S. ally and have been for a long time. And they remember that we saved them. I was there. I defended Saudi Arabia, the Holy Land of all things. As a Christian, I defend the Muslim Holy Land against an invasion. Ironic, isn't it? But they're still grateful for that to this day. And Kuwait is very grateful because that place would have been completely destroyed if we hadn't intervened. So the U.S. bases in the Middle East are not going anywhere. The only base I think we have to be concerned about might go somewhere is Diego Garcia, which is geopolitically very important for the United States. Our air base there out in the Indian Ocean. That, of course, is part of the Chagos Islands and this whole argument about, you know, the Brits giving away. But we've got a long-term lease on that, and I think the UK and the United States will ensure that that base remains available to the United States. Without it, that presents a significant problem for the US. That base is remotely located, and our strategic bombers can reach anywhere in the Asia-Pacific region they need to from there. Without it, we would be at a big geopolitical disadvantage. And so, therefore, it's not going anywhere. But it's definitely one that's under consideration. There's a push to take it away.
Yeah, Chris, I wanted to ask you a question about Australia. Seeing that there's some Australians in the room today, I rather not ask it. George, are you still awake?
Yeah, still awake.
Just making sure you guys are, man. Let us hear the hyena. Okay. Chris, Donald Trump, during his first running for presidency, used the term drain the swamp. Drain the swamp. And that was the battle against the deep state. Now, the deep state, it's very difficult to define who and how the deep state works. But we know it's all about controlling, money-wise, the world. So, to an extent, all countries, whether you are a target or whether you are an ally, is subject to whatever the deep state do to you. So, the deep state belongs, okay, maybe I must put it differently, but you cannot drain the swamp without getting rid of the deep state. So it's a very long process. And we have seen now that Donald Trump, since his second term has started, he sort of bypassed Europe in all his major actions, the major steps he's taking. He's bypassing Europe, he's bypassing Britain, he's almost ignoring them. I mean, normally, when there's a new British Prime Minister, the very first place he goes to is the United States. Now we have this new guy, I hope you are sleeping, this new guy who's just been elected in the UK, and his very first trip is to Ukraine. Is there a definite action? Because my next question, maybe I should put it all together. It is as if they now realize that the United States might leave them behind, might leave NATO, although I don't think it will just happen. But I don't think the United States would want to get into a larger conflict at this stage, especially not in Europe, against the Russians. But he has a definitive action with his claims on Greenland, his claims on Canada. We have talked about Panama, we have talked about all this difficult places. And you know, Venezuela, Cuba, the Strait of Hormuz, even this other strait of Bab el Mandab into the Red Sea. He's getting to all of them. And then he asked Europe and everybody, come and help. And they said, no, but it's not our war. Very cunningly, Trump plays it now and say, well, if you're getting into a war, then you expect us to come and help. But as these things move around, I think that South Africa will be just another Cuba along the line to get to where he wants to go with influencing the world. Away from the British dominance, the British money, the European influence, and create a total new sort of standing order. But I don't know whether it makes sense, my question.
Okay, it's quite a lengthy question, so let me address the first part of it, and I'll come back to the choke points, strategic choke points. The deep state is real. People, it is amorphous and difficult to explain. But let me give a personal experience. I worked in the Pentagon, and after we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, after 9/11, there were many of the analysts, civilians who were working at the Defense Intelligence Agency in the basement of the Pentagon where I was working, who a couple of years later, suddenly they're like, well, there was no evidence that they had nuclear weapons and we shouldn't have invaded. And I'm listening to these people over, the water cooler talk and lunch and listening to them. And so I looked at their names and I would go back and pull up the reports that they wrote at that time. They were the biggest cheerleaders. Go in, there's nuclear weapons, and yeah, we've got to invade Iraq, yeah. So people like that are in the bureaucracy, and that's just dishonest. If you made the wrong call, just be honest about it. Don't pretend that you spoke differently at the time. The deep state is real. Trump said we drained the swamp. I don't think he realized how deep the swamp was before he came in office. And most of his first administration, sadly, spent a lot of time fighting the deep state. So in many respects, it's unfortunate we had to suffer the disaster known as Joe Biden. And I'm talking we, you and me, the world. This moron destroyed the economy of the world. Everything doubled in price, essentially. And they talk about inflation of 9% in America. That's a joke. Everything I purchase in America, except for something for Amazon or Shein or Temu, which I never shop at, is double and triple what it was. And it hasn't gone up since Trump was coming, but it went up the entire time that Joe Biden was impersonating the President of the United States. So Biden being in office those 4 years was horrible. We never should have to go through the COVID scam and all the other stuff that happened politically. But I have to tell you that in some respects, it might have been the best thing that possibly happened in U.S. politics. Because while Trump was in the wilderness for 4 years and the Biden administration's FBI planted top secret document covers to pretend that Trump stole classified information, while Joe Biden actually had been stealing it for 25 years and hiding in his garage and his Corvette to distract from his crimes, they kept charging Trump with all these non-existent crimes and trying to distract him. But he secretly, quietly, I believe, had a team building a playbook. And this is how it went. He got back in office day one. These are the things I'm going to do to piss off the media and Democrats today. And I'm going to sign this executive order, which nobody knows. Day two, these are the things I'm going to do to piss them off. And I'm going to sign this executive order. Day three, we're going to, and that's exactly what he did for the first 3 months last year. In his first term, he took an action that made sense. And as soon as he did it, the leftists went to the courts and they put a stop to it. There was an injunction, he couldn't go forward, and it slowed down his pace of reforming the swamp. This time, he hit them with so many executive orders, so many presidential actions that they didn't know which ones to respond to. As a consequence, they responded to a bunch of them and didn't put enough resources to defeat some of his actions. So he's been much more successful. I would argue that Trump is actually draining the swamp this time. It's a very lengthy process and it'll never be complete, but at least he's made a lot of progress. And we're also finding out that all these loving, sweet, wonderful institutions, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, and as I prefer to call the American Criminal Liberties Union, it's American Civil Liberties Union. But the Southern Poverty Law Center, it turns out, is nothing but a racist bunch of clowns. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which rails against racism in America, hired Klan members to demonstrate and cause chaos, and agitators on the far right. They put them on their payroll, paid them millions of dollars so that they could exist and say, we have to exist to fight this right-wing threat. They're in court now, they're being sued, and they're going to go down in ball of flames. So that's also part of the state, even civil organizations, and there's constant battles against them. All right, so the second part of this was the geostrategic choke points. So yeah, Trump has also got a game plan internationally, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure he really wants Greenland. I thought it was a lot of bluster, but I will tell you that Trump's threats, and his threats of tariffs, and his threats have had substantive results. Greenland is one of them. For decades, Denmark has been riding on its laurels and resting on the work of the United States. Our Navy supplanted the British Navy in patrolling the global lines of communication. So the Straits of Malacca in Asia, the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, Maghreb, and all these places around the globe, it's been the U.S. Navy that's been patrolling these places, ensuring that their sea lanes of communication have remained open since the Second World War in large measure. The Brits used to do that. They have, like, I think, a dinghy and a Zodiac and one ship left, so they really can't do that anymore. But the U.S. has been doing that for a long time. And the Greenland thing, Denmark had not been defending Greenland. And with the Arctic Passage being open part of the year now, and all the mineral resources are supposed to be under there, including petroleum and metals and things, the Chinese, who have no Arctic space, have claimed the Arctic for themselves. That's interesting. The Russians, of course, have Arctic space. As an Arctic nation, we have a right to be up there. And so Trump recognizes that Greenland is strategic geopolitically, and that it needs to be patrolled so that its fisheries protected, so its minerals protected, and so that we don't have sneak attacks coming in that way, or having a hostile power like China or Russia put radar places there, or nuclear sites, or whatever it is. So Trump, I think, wanted to give the Danes do something. Well, after Trump threatened to take Greenland by force, Denmark finally committed to spend $786 million buying cruisers to patrol Greenland exclusively. Then they also did a naval exercise there, which wasn't being done before. It's like the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal was about to have this contract for running the canal awarded to a Chinese firm. Trump said, tariffs. That bid was taken off the table, and now American companies are going to get the contract for maintaining the Panama Canal, which we built at great expense and the loss of 30,000 American lives. So I think Trump is very effective, but he's the ultimate negotiator, and he's the ultimate troll. He knows how to troll these countries, and I think that's what he's doing with these two things. It may not be popular, people may think it's silly, but at the end of the day, he gets results. And whether you like him or dislike him, if you're objective, you'll see that he gets results. The only result that I'm not happy with is Iran. We can talk about it later.
Thanks, Chris. Interesting question coming your way here. Why have the US started the refugee program project in South Africa? Do the US government know about something that is coming to South Africa that most whites are ignoring? Stefan Meijma, who is asking that.
Stefan, thank you for your question from afar, wherever you're at. So does the U.S. government know something that the average South African doesn't know? I would say that, unfortunately, the average South African, black, white, or brown, has become inured, anesthetized to the violence. We talked about this earlier, and to the corruption that's taking place. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't open up one of these South African newspapers and hear about another corruption case. We just got out that Eskom $3 billion in irregular contracts for diesel. And there's like another 47 billion rand that talk about they can't account for. Every day, somewhere in this government or parastatal or a politician has got corruption. But you hear it every day. So you just, unless it affects you directly. It's, I think a lot of South Africans are in the bubble. Not like I talked about the Cape Town bubble people, the Cape Town Karens and the Sens and Shirens. I'm not talking about that. But it's like the frog in the pot. Cyril talked about. You don't realize that the water's about to boil around you because you're in it. For me, one of the great aspects for me, since I don't live here, and I understand South Africa, at least I think I do, is when I come back every 6 months, I can see the decline. It's visible to me because I'm not in it. I remember that I didn't blow a tire on this road because there were no potholes last year, but now it's nothing but potholes. And I remember that, this, that, and the other. So when you come back periodically, or you get those South Africans who moved abroad, say went to New Zealand, have been home in 10 years to come to visit their grandkids or something like that, or they bring their grandkids to visit grandparents, and they're just shocked at what they see. And I think that's part of the problem. People don't see it. That doesn't mean the United States government has some great insight into it beyond that. They may, but I believe that that's a big part of it. What was the other part of the question? Did I do it all? Something the U.S. government knows. That,
Do they know something that we don't know?
No, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I just think that they have more objective vision on it from outside the boiling pot. Does that make sense? I think that's the difference here. They're obviously, we have 19 intelligence agencies. I'm not working any of them now, but I'm sure that they probably have information that maybe will make our hair grow. But certainly, having an outside view looking in is very helpful. You're not in the pond and so you can look at things objectively. And that's one of the things that helps me. I don't own a business here. I don't own a farm. I don't own any property here. My interaction is directly with South Africans themselves and not with any business interests. So I have no vested interest in South Africa other than my love for South Africans, which I think helps keep me objective.
Because, I think that Donald Trump probably started the refugee program to frustrate the ANC.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, but I've been watching you and not following you. But if you look at his tactics, which he is using throughout the world, threatening, shouting, screaming, pressurizing, and I think to bring in the refugee program is the most frustrating thing for the ANC in South Africa, and maybe even in Africa, because here for the very first time is not a government that is crawling on their knees in front of the black people, but there's a president who will say, well, I'm going to save you white guys, you deserve to come to the United States and not the other way around. But I just want to take this next one, Colin Hornby. Colin, this question I'm going to answer. I'm not going to give it to Chris, because I don't think Chris has changed his answer. He wanted to know from you, actually, Chris, whether you have changed your critical opinion of Putin since 2022. And I don't think you did. And Mark Weber that is asking, do you think the CIA visit to Russia has anything to do with a possible strike on Britain? I don't think anybody really knows what the CIA director has gone, what he has done in Moscow. Not the Russians have said anything, and the United States hasn't said anything as well. Is there any other questions that wants to come up? Okay, but
Can I forgot part of that first question. Can I go back to that?
Yes.
Okay, so the question was about the refugee program. That was the first part of the question I didn't answer. Apologies. So the refugee program, what I believe the Trump administration was trying to do, and it said so at the time, and I still believe it, and then I'll give you my personal view, which is aligned with his, is the Trump administration was trying to send a very clear message to the government of South Africa that Washington is not happy with the direction this country is going and how the government of South Africa has undermined our national interests. The government of South Africa has undermined the United States' national security interests and our friends, partners, and allies. They've done it consistently over a 25-year period, and the time for that should be over. That's the point. And so Trump ended all foreign aid, which was about $450 million a year. Now that's money that's not coming here. And then he created the refugee program. And I think there's a legitimate basis for the refugee program. People are being persecuted. And it was reported as a white farmer program. But I will tell you that if 10,590 commercial farmers left South Africa, you'd all be starving tonight. There'd be no food in this country. None whatsoever. There's only 32,000 commercial farmers left. So that's clearly not what's going on here. Also, it was set up not just for Afrikaners, but for other racial minorities. And I mean, coloreds, Indians, and even if you black South Africans have gone over who are part of white families or Indian families. But I agree with Wyatt. I think in no small way, this was meant to poke the African National Congress in the eye having the refugee program. It was meant to say, listen, what you're doing is wrong. We see it, and we're going to help people because of your actions. And I believe that is, you know, without them publicly stating it, and I agree with you 100%. I think part of it was just to poke the ANC in the eye. And here's the thing. Since that happened, what's happened? Of course, the ANC claimed it was all about Gaza and the ICJ case against Israel. That's not why the United States took this action. But here's the funny thing. The inability or unwillingness of the South African government to protect its borders and allow, just like our government did, allow your country to be invaded by criminal alien invaders, millions of them, who've driven up housing prices and taken housing that's available for other people and taken jobs, which is wrong. That has led to this domestic terrorist and vigilante pushback from groups like Operation Udella and March and March against illegal aliens, legal aliens, and even some South Africans harassing, attacking them. And as a consequence, Ghana and Nigeria are really pissed off. You know, there's talk in Ghana of taking South Africa to the ICJ for its treatment of immigrants, of illegal immigrants. And yesterday, the United Nations condemned South Africa for its unwillingness to protect these illegals and give them housing and refuge and things like that. So this anger with South Africa is not Trump. It's now the rest of Africa. And I've also seen a pretty gruesome video of a South African truck driver who was tortured, his ears sliced off, and then they used a panga to hack his legs off at the knee. And they joked and laughed and said, this is how you treat foreigners in South Africa. Now you know what it feels like. That's actually happening right now around Africa. So, so that was the part about the refugee thing. And so I agree with you 100%. What was the question that's coming up now? We have a question.
It's on again. Okay. Now I'm going to give some opportunity to some of the guys to ask questions as well, but I wanted to commend something. You must remember, during the apartheid years, I loved that time. Somebody will probably...
Oh, that'll be used against you, I'm sure.
But, tongue in the cheek, but you know, during that stage with the onslaught against the old National Party government, and I did not necessarily agree with the National Party's policies, but then the soldier is being told and taught that you must be apolitical because you serve the government of the day. And I think if the ANC after 94 stick to that same model, they could still have a decent army today, which they don't have anymore. But the point is, while everybody was on a daily basis protesting in front of London House in London, the South African embassy, and it was a beautiful place. It's now a destitute place. It's now all gone. But during all those years, with the protests, the support in the United Nations, and every country in the world, and Africa was full of ANC refugees at those states. I think it's a question of payback time. Africa see it as payback time. For years, we have housed your people, we have fed you, and you have promised free and open access to South Africa once you came into power. Now they can't protect the borders. They can't keep the people away because they can't break their promises, which they have made. But another interesting thing is, you know, it actually came from Wally, is not here today, Wally Burger, who's farming upstream. They said that the government is now charging the employers if they employ illegal immigrants. But how can you do that if it was your duty in the first place to stop them at the border, which is not happening? Now you want to bully and punish, what is it, you ask a boete?
Fine.
To fine the employer because they employ people that should have never prevented or allowed into the country. Sorry, my English became like Upington at the moment. It's very difficult. Time to get some questions asked. Who's first? France?
Chris, thanks for what
You come and stand here.
Hello. Chris, thanks for your perspective you've been giving. South Africa was probably one of the most advanced countries in Africa prior to 94, or building up to 94. We had very good relationships with the US, with Israel, with some countries in Western Europe. The whole concept of changing and freeing the Uhuru thing, the speech by Macmillan, Winds of Change, etc., blew through Africa, and it actually happened. And the African continent aligned themselves with the communists. So in those days, the bipolar system was still in place, East against West, Wasco against. So democratic change took place for the sake of democracy. But that changed the whole geopolitical situation and the fall of the Berlin Wall. So my question today is to you and your opinion on that, please. What is or your thoughts on how the American people feel, or the European people? I can't talk for them, but if there's a refugee problem, if the people see that white people are being terminated, etc., and it's not only white people, some blacks suffer as well. I'll come to the crux of my question. Wouldn't it be feasible for someone to create a state of Israel on the southern tip of Africa to include the Cape, the Western Cape, the Northern Cape, where first world norms are implemented? It's not black-white thing. It's not the black for the blanc. So it's a geographical area which can prosper in the same way that Israel prospers, Japan prospers, Switzerland prospers, based on intellectual capacity and building. And annihilating a certain group of people that are only sucking and cannot build constructively. Would the US support something like that in terms of clause 235 of our constitution and secession of, let's say, a certain area, which will mean that we will need huge financial or capital inputs. We will need defense structures. My dream is Israel on the west, on the southern tip of Africa, to secure the strategic sea route around the Cape, to make sure that there's American bases in Simonstown where they can launch their or dock submarines and the Navy, etc. So, or would the US rather tolerate clowns and lunatics which they can manipulate with finances? So you have the two options. support somebody that can create something stable for the future, or just tolerate a Mickey Mouse government which they can manipulate with money or whatever?
That's quite a bit. Let me try to address it the best I can. First off, on the question of secession in South Africa, if secession occurs, I think that KwaZulu-Natal was seceded long before the Western Cape does, for various reasons. Not the least of which is because the Democratic Alliance is in control of the Western Cape, and Alan Wynne refuses to hold a referendum, which they promised to do so years ago. As far as secession, let's just take the Western Cape. Western Cape, in my view, could succeed as a country. It has the resources, it has industry, it has the population density, and it also has ports that are viable. Although Cape Town is the worst performing port in the world at present, it can be fixed. It doesn't take much to fix it, just political will. So the Western Cape could survive, and then the question is, well, what about its borders? Well, it's very easy. You can control the borders, just set them up with border control stations there. And what about military? Well, there's enough human capital left in South Africa that would probably migrate to the Western Cape, where it's already there, that could help form a defense force. So I think it's a practical thing that could be done. The question is whether it happens politically. And then the question is, as you posed, is how would the U.S. do this and what would they do? I don't think the U.S. would actively be involved in anything that would seek to break up the existing union in South Africa, the country, the Republic of South Africa. However, you're asking a counterfactual, what will happen in the future if secession happens. I suspect that depending on who the president of the United States is, there might be recognition of a breakaway, something like that possibly. As far as the support, if the U.S. did recognize the country like that, then I'm sure that they would do what they could to generate grants or loans that would help. But I don't think that the Western Cape actually needs that much help if it were to break away. It's already net donor to the federal, to the central government of South Africa. It gets much more to the government that's back out of it. As far as who's capable, there are capable states in Africa that are even on South Africa's doorstep, led by majority black governments like Botswana. Botswana has been very productive, successful over the years. It's not a question of black and white, and you said it's not a question of black and white, it's a question of culture. In Botswana, it was never one of the, I argue it's the only country in Africa never colonized. So they say Liberia was never colonized. That's poppycock. It was colonized by freed slaves and blacks and mixed race Americans who came there and imposed an alien political system on the indigenous population. So it was colonized. Just because people were black doesn't mean it wasn't colonized. Ethiopia claims it was never colonized. That's also balderdash. During the Second World War, we had said South Africans and Brits and West Africans there liberated because the Italians occupied Addis Ababa and colonized it for a short period during the Second World War. Botswana was never colonized. Botswana was a protectorate at the request of the Nkosi, the chiefs who came to the Brits and said, sorry, we're a little worried about these Boer coming through here and they're going to take over. Could you use this as a protectorate? And then it was so unimportant to the British Empire that the capital wasn't even in Botswana or Bechuanaland. Does anybody know where the capital of Bechuanaland was? It's in Mafeking. It was in South Africa. And so it was so unimportant. So Botswana is a unique example because it was never actually had the alien political system imposed upon it. The people of Botswana were allowed to pretty much do what they'd always done, rely on the local chiefs who were selected and who decided disputes. And that's why the system worked pretty well. Unfortunately, under Eric Masisi, Botswana, which has had a long history of little to no corruption, had a lot of corruption in the COVID and post-COVID area, and Botswana is struggling with it right now. But the point is that those governments can exist and succeed, but there's a culture here in South Africa in politics that makes it almost impossible for people to do the right thing. If you report the truth, you get assassinated. Babita Deo Karan simply reported an accounting error, and she was riddled with bullets and cost her life. We had the other gentleman, can't think of his name right now, who was a technician for Transnet, and they thought he was a whistleblower, so they murdered him because he wasn't a whistleblower. He was just out fixing the lines. That was over the part to go on the rails, and they charged like 100 times the cost. So yeah, it can be done. Yes, and with the United States help, I don't know if it would help, but they might recognize after the fact.
Ladies and gentlemen, we could have a mic problem. If you've got a question, please come to the front, and I'll give you a mic and ask the question. I've got a question for you. Wait. Okay, sorry.
Hope you're always Up under. Stand down.
Sounds like a recce. He's out there in front.
Hi, Chris. Great honor and privilege. I've been following you for a good number of years, and I would like to thank you for what you are doing not only to our people, which is the white population of South Africa and my sincere minority to my heart, but also to the greater South African good. I would like to ask you two questions, which I think is pertinent. The one would be that I'd like to make a bold statement that the whole of South Africa, not only the white population, across all ethnic groups, are very tightly caught within the Stockholm syndrome, because we are living in total denial to the reality of what is being opposed upon us at this point in time in the South African history. And we all have a similar enemy, but we tend to sort of accept the enemy with graciousness, and we stand and protect them. I'd like to make that one bold statement, which I'd like to react to. And the other one, I would like to make another very sincere bold statement, and that is, irrespective of which political party would take over from the African National Congress at this point in time. Sorry. My knowledge of the financial situation in South Africa is to such an extent that I don't hold any, and I don't foresee any enlightenment in the financial demise of South Africa at this point in time, as we are critically financially exposed to over-indebtedness. And those are the two questions I'd like to consider. And the one is obviously my statement towards South Africa being captured within Stockholm syndrome. And the other one is South Africa having a situation where, irrespective of which political party is going to take over, we are still going to be in a sincere and a dire financial situation. Thanks.
First of all, thank you very much for being a long-time viewer. Be sure to hit the like button next time you watch. All right, so thanks a lot for that. Okay, so that first one, yeah, I do believe there's a degree of Stockholm syndrome here, where people just go along with what's happening. But also, I said earlier, South Africans are inured to violence, and I didn't tell that story. Probably not time for now, but let me just say this. When I started doing the videos after I retired from active service in 2020, during the COVID era, a lot of South Africans came to my show, particularly white South Africans, and a lot of them, Afrikaners in particular, are like, well, what are we supposed to do? There are just 2.8 million of us. There's 63 million people here, and we're all alone. First off, I will tell you that not all white South Africans are in your camp. You've probably heard of Rolf Meyer, Max Greer, Carl Niehaus, the list goes on and on. Or is it Carl Meyer? I'm not sure which it is. Anyway, but sorry, did I say that out loud? Anyway, sorry, I apologize for that. Anyway, seriously, not everyone's in the boat with you, okay? So let's just assume, we'll just take broad numbers and then we'll trim it down. I told South Africans, you have to know your own history. And that's how I started getting into South Africa at that time, because I called into Ronaldo Goes channel, and, or should I say Ronaldo Goes, because he doesn't like the way I pronounce it in Afrikaans. But Ronaldo's channel, and I talked for 40 minutes one day on a phone call, and people were like, who's this guy? How does he know so much about him? And the reason I called is because these South Africans don't know their own history. I understand those under the age of 39 million because it's been whitewashed out of your history books. But so many people don't know their history. It was so shocking to me. And the thing is that, okay, let's go back. So 2.8 million white Afrikaners. Let's go with that figure, okay, roughly. Maybe it's 2.4, but I'm going to go 2.8. I'm optimistic, okay? Still in South Africa, not including the ones living in New Zealand, Australia, and so on. But there's 2 million other whites, and I know you've got this history with the English. Get over it, okay? I know that's easy for me to say. I'm not South African, but I mean that's this what folks did in the Bush War, serving together. A lot of that went away, but there's still some of that occasionally out there. So that's another 2 million. That's 4.8 million. The colors didn't magically appear. They're a product of South Africa, and they exist for a reason. Not because people sexually abuse slaves, because men and women tend to get together, and they do things. And so you have a color community of 6 to 8 million South Africans who have names like Human and Vandemava and De Villiers, and they didn't just take those names because they work for someone named that. They're the offspring of unions of people And you have a community who are largely Afrikaans speaking, and many of them tend to be Dutch Calvinists as well. And they have much in common with Afrikaners, in particular. Some of them consider themselves Afrikaners as well. So you take 6 to 8 million plus 4.8 million, some year almost 11 million people. And that's before we even get to conservative white South Africans. The average South African, in their heart, my experience, is generally conservative. They believe in faith, family, and flag. Now, that may not be how everybody lives their lives every day, but at the core, that's what they are. I know lots of black conservatives in South Africa who believe the same way that conservatives do, and much of the white community does. They believe in the Western standard and responsibility and hard work and faith and taking care of your family. So then I forgot Indians. The Indians, 1.3 million of them. Many of them are the same way. So before you know it, there's 63 million people, you've probably got a potential pool without even talking about black South Africans of third formal honor and say, just us Boer, just us Afrikaner, just us Burki. You have allies out there, whether you realize or not. I think that's the first part, that there may be Stockholm syndrome, but I think there's a much larger constituency of people. And we're not even to just black South Africans who might be left or center, who are just hot full of what's going on in this country. So I think that people have to look at a broader perspective, and I've been trying to convince people that for a few years. Some people are believing that, others don't believe it at all, and that's their prerogative. Your second question, what was it at now? Oh, the financial picture. So can you say again, sorry, very quickly?
Well, the economic constraints, should any other political party take?
Oh, yes, okay. All right, so that's what I need. So I will tell you that there is tens of billions, if not probably hundreds of billions of U.S. investment that wants to come to South Africa for a lot of reasons. Now, that's in spite of the fact that I think South Africa is a very bad place to invest in. Let me explain why. I've got to provide my own security force. I've got to provide my own generators. I've got to provide training because I have an inadequate workforce. Then I've got to give, my equity to someone that didn't earn it just because they've got a great tan. That's a problem. And on top of that, you've got, if I am cheated by someone, in America, I can go to court and sue them and get an outcome. In South Africa, there's no guarantee of that unless I'm willing to pay a little bakshish under the table. And that's a true statement. So there are many negatives to investing in South Africa. But then, any country that's falling apart, people who are clever can make money. In Liberia, if I want to live there, I can be a multimillionaire because I know how things work there. And if I'm willing to pay a few bribes, I can be incredibly wealthy in just a couple of years. But I'm not willing to do that. So there's always people profit. So I would say this: if the ANC loses the levers of power in a significant way in this municipal election, there will be a lot of pressure to bring resources in here and a lot of pressure to change the laws. And if the ANC was out of power and a more moderate party came control either the coalition directly, I am very convinced that money will flow into South Africa very quickly. It's a question of not trusting the current regime. That's why the money's not coming here. But even so, money still comes. I mean, the new BRICS Bank, that's the Chinese communist thing that they built. They just gave them another $407 million yesterday to build a hospital. What's the hospital's ever built? We know that the Charlotte Kixta Hospital still hasn't been repaired from the fire a couple years ago. I think I answered your question.
Skalk, jy kan daar staan. Chris, we got 140 simultaneous watchers who have joined in on the Saturday afternoon, and we are grateful for them as well, and thank guys that you are sending us questions and everything that goes with it. And there's one or two questions which I will handle just a little bit later. Skalk is a farmer downstream from here, and I know that he's interested in a question or two.
Yeah, thank you very much. For 10 minutes or 5 minutes, there must be no corporal punishment. Sam Nujoma, when he came into power in 1990, I think by now know the guy, Gert Engelbrecht, he was also a recce. His father was a very jokeable person. And he told us, Sam, stop all corporal punishment at school. We asked him why. He said he want to make sub A or grade 1 in school. So if he could have asked it, I cannot think also me. We are, when Donald Trump, or President Trump, I can say president because he is president material, when we saw on YouTube last year, February, I think it was 2 days after he announced it, that I saw it on a Saturday. When I heard it, there was coming a sadness over me. The first time ever, but for at least in the last 32 years, someone took his hand out to us. But in the same time, my grandfather started here alongside the river in 1928 on the place Kanoniland. He was one of the people who go, the first ones who just look. They called them himself. He only started 5 at school. They called them for speeders. My dad can just tell what is that. Like a recce. Yeah.
How the situation is.
And they were very poor, and what they have done, if it's a place you can go today to look, still they built a dam. There's no workers, they were very poor. They were at the end of the day 52 people starting there with donkeys. They built a canal. They have to flatten their fields. And when we grew up, we grew very near to my grandpa. And immediately it felt for me, yeah, I can't ever leave what they have done, the history of the river, and what they have went through. But in the meantime, the refugee program, and we see our young people, the farming is not always well, and I want to lift it out. We have this week Northern Cape Agricultural Congress at Kimberley for 2 days. And what I saw there, they show us a lot of graphics. Our cost is overrunning the income over a lot of products. And one thing that we in the raisin industry, the river, alongside the river, and our raisins, just the fact, I think we export plus minus 10%, but that 10% which couldn't go to America because it made that we can't are compatible with the price. That make a lot of problem for us now. And then you think, isn't it better to go there? Maybe you can do more from there. Like me, I'm also on the raisin, our producers forum. Maybe I can do more if I'm there. But the refugee program, that's a much more easier thing than you immigrate. And then I see myself as a traitor if I'm leaving. When I not leave my people, as long as we are more people together, it's so much better for us. But our farming farmers are deployed, our accounts just got less and less. But so my answer is then the plan B, if you will immigrate to America, yeah, immigrate, let's immigrate. What is that possible of because a lot of refugees, we was already told that they could go to America. They like that friend of us there, 5 of them denied this week. So the plan B, if you can't be a refugee. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Salk. I'm pretty confident you speak English only in self-defense. It's not a criticism. It's a thank you because you worked very hard to share that. An interesting story. Thanks. A lot of points there. Let me address a couple very quickly. Yes, the inputs are higher than the income. This is a problem for farmers around the world because commodity prices, unfortunately, they go up and down. And that's a problem. As far as access to U.S. market, South Africa is once again, I think, it's not eligible, but it is part of the African Growth Opportunity Act, which has helped the agricultural sector out quite a bit. So those tariffs aren't there. They're not supposed to be the first products. Although tariffs on other products are still 12% right now. So I understand the input issue. It's a problem. I was a dairy farmer back in high school. We had jerseys and currencies and a whole team or two. And we sold butter and milk, and it was always difficult to turn a profit even back then because we weren't subsidized. The big farms were subsidized, but we were a small family farm. As far as the refugees and what's going on there, you gave a very long story, so I'm trying to remember the points here that I need to focus on. As far as the plan B, that's always a good thing in life to have anyway. I mean, I always plan branches and sequels for every idea I come up with, just in case. So for instance, for this trip here, Lennox and I were talking about inviting me to come back up here, and I had to figure out how to fit in my schedule. So I came up with 3 different courses of action, and fortunately went with the first one, which is down here. Unfortunately for me, after the fact, Rob Hersolf got a ticket for me and said, okay, I got a ticket for today's game in Cape Town. So I already had an obligation, so I passed the ticket. But yeah, the refugees at Plan B and the ineligibility letters, that's a very frustrating thing for folks. Let me address one other piece of what you said in the story, and I think this is very important for South Africans and Afrikaners in particular. So, the Nguni-speaking peoples didn't just originate here. They came down the Rift Valley and colonized Africa, coming down, crossing the Zambezi Limpopo River and arriving in what is today South Africa about 1,600 years ago. Those of European descent came here. They weren't Afrikaners. They were Dutch initially, then French Huguenot, and Germans, and they all came. And going back to that time, the Germans began arriving in South Africa in the 1670s already, some of them. And that's, by the way, if you check your DNA, largest admixture for the Afrikaner community is actually German, then Dutch, then French, And you can break into some of these folks, but some Khoi and San mixed in there, a little bit of South Asian too, from time to time. Nothing wrong with that, just a fact. It's a reality. So the Germans who came here, if you follow history, the 30 Years' War, which devastated the German lands in Central Europe, 50% of the German population was wiped out in that 30-year war. Complete political structure was destroyed, and every army you can think of was marching across German lands, fighting between Catholics and Calvinists, Protestants. There's even the Swedish invaded Germany. There's an island in Lake Constance known as the Bodensee in Germany, which borders Switzerland, that has been owned by a Swedish count and his descendants since the 30 Years' War. It's called Inselmina, and botanical garden. It's quite lovely, by the way. So the Germans who came here in 1672, 75, 78, many of them were alive during the 30 Years' War, or their parents were alive. They were fleeing religious persecution. They were refugees, in all honesty, many of them. They came for a better life, they came here. And then, of course, the French Huguenots. The Edict of Nantes was issued in 1590 by the French king to give the French Calvinists, the Huguenots, religious liberty so they could prosper in France. But like happens with many groups, like the Templars, others get jealous of their success. Templars, Jews, Huguenots, And so in 1685, that French king revoked the Edict of Nantes, and the mass slaughter of French Calvinists began. The rape, the murder, the plundering, the torture, and at least 50,000 fled to Prussia and settled around Berlin. Others fled to the Spanish Netherlands, which of course we know is the Netherlands today, and others went to the United Kingdom and so on and so forth. Some of them then migrated to South Africa. They were religious refugees. They fled religious persecution for their very lives. So the people who became the Afrikaners in the southern tip of Africa are an amalgam of those who were seeking a better life and those who were refugees. You are not a Ferraya. You're not a traitor. You're not fleeing if you're being persecuted and your only option is an escape hatch. And people should make judgments about people making that very difficult decision. And also follow by saying this. Regardless of whether 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 or 300,000 Afrikaners leave South Africa as refugees from American shores, there will always be Afrikaners in South Africa. This is your home. This is where you formed as the people. And this will always be your origins, and your culture will be here. And just because you go to America doesn't mean you don't know what a bride is. You'll still do that. You'll try to introduce to Americans. But there will always be Afrikaners here in the southern state, not just here, but also Botswana and in Swaziland, Lesotho, and of course Namibia. That is who you are, and that's going to continue. The key is to get the young ones to have more babies, okay? But you are not a traitor if you leave. Your ancestors left to come here. And anyone that calls you a traitor needs to look at themselves in there.
Chris, thank you for that one. I had the experience when we were visiting Australia during 1970. 2017.
I thought you were old, but not that old.
Okay, yeah. In 2017, and there was a lot of the veterans which we saw. They came forward and asked the question, exactly this question. They say, or their fear, or their disappointment was that people in South Africa seized them, or saw them as cowards, people who have fled the country, vlug in die land uit. And I told them exactly the same story which you said now. I said, if you move for better living conditions, more safety, more freedom, a better future for your children, just remember that your forefathers did exactly the same 200 years ago. And especially there in Perth, George. But there's a couple of more questions that the people have asked here on the phone. I will check some of them again right now. But firstly, Mark Weber, he asked about SBB and your thoughts on it. But we have discussed SBB and what we stand for, what our purpose eventually are. Because we see ourselves as a sort of Armageddon situation, the Armageddon organization, if all else failed. A lot of stuff has changed since the more pro-government in the United States under President Trump came into power. Things did change a little bit for the better for some people, and they stretched out the possible or the immediate collapse of South Africa for quite a while. So I think nothing on our viewpoint has changed in as far as our final objective is. If nothing bad happens in South Africa, then we do nothing bad. But if things go wrong in South Africa, and not all of us will qualify for the refugee program. All of us cannot go onto the refugee program. A lot of us don't want to go because, as Chris said, we are proud to be who we are. We are proud South Africans. We are proud people. And we want to advance ourselves. We don't want to lose that history of a first heart transplant, a history of the weapons that we have manufactured, the history of the G6 cannon with the distance that we could range, with the RSA missiles, with the nuclear weapons which we have built. We don't want to forget that history. We accept the reality of change that has happened in South Africa. We accepted it. But now we now destroy everything that was worthwhile to us. It changed the picture. And if you are a patriot, you will get upset because everything that was once dear to you and valuable and good to you is all of a sudden the focus of destruction. That made me, and most of the people who sit here, probably very rebellious against the current ANC government. I almost use the other word, but that would have put us in a very dangerous bracket for us. We must prepare ourselves for the worst situation in South Africa. Coming back to you, Chris. First of all, during a previous discussion, we said, and he said, no one will come to your assistance. Little bit wrong, because Donald Trump did come to our assistance with the refugee program. But it's not for us the final solution to the problem. We will probably sit with the regime change in South Africa, a color revolution of sorts, orchestrated, might happen in South Africa, but that might just be the spark that creates chaos in this country. If we look at how the people, if we study the people, how they conduct themselves when they are getting angry. Francis once told me that the disadvantaged person is the guy who burned down the train tonight. And tomorrow morning he's standing at the same station waiting for the train he burned down last night. Now that's a situation which makes us angry, but which also made us realize that they will do things stupid enough. And the rest of the world don't realize that they are capable of that stupid, murderous mistakes that can happen. And if that happens, we must be ready. Look how quickly things happen, how quickly things escalate. And we cannot predict what is going to happen, what is going to jump out when and where. But better be ready than be sorry. That don't mean that we must not be aware to changing situations, different possibilities. We must keep an open mind. And that's why I'm finding Chris very practical approach to South Africa so enlightening. For me, it's good to hear a person who can talk and see all the very good things which might be possible. But he knows as well as I know that we are in the hands or the situational hands, because we as a people don't have any real means left. we don't have a lot of money. Money just become worth less. Yes, this English language is sometimes difficult, but worse. It's almost like we don't tend to, so we must sort of start rounding off. I want you to give your take on this one, because we have talked a lot. We know what we want, but we also know that perhaps what we want, we are not going to get, and we can get something far worse than what anyone might expect. So we must be ready.
So I think that one of the challenges you have is that people don't really understand what SBA is. They don't understand the role of it, and others may attribute things to it that are unrealistic. I understand what your role is and what you're trying to do. You're preparing for if the balloon goes up. You want to have a contingency to save people, protect people in that circumstance. Because I'll tell you, there's nobody that's got a plan to save people in townships if the balloon goes up. Innocent people in townships. There's no plan to save caters, that's for darn sure. But yes, I think people misunderstand what you're all about. And I think your point is valid. It's the destruction of everything that's near and dear. This whole conversation about white genocide, which has not been raised here, and I don't raise it, but the media raises it all the time. But I've said unequivocally for years, there's a cultural genocide against the Afrikaans language and the history of white South Africans. I mean, the vandalization of Kustelaway's gravesite. Why was his tombstone vandalized? Everything against black South Africans. He had something against English. That's how he fought, and so that sort of thing. The Paul Kruger statue in Pretoria has to be moved. Statues are removed. We have the same stupidity happening in America. If you want a history, then create your own history. Don't destroy someone else's. There's no reason why. Like for instance, in America, in New York City, there's a statue of Karl Marx. Of Joseph Stalin in New York City in a park. The ultimate murderous communist. What people put it up. I don't go there and paint it or tear it down. Yet during the Black Lives Matters nonsense that happened in our country, they went and spray painted the 54th Massachusetts Regiment's monument in Boston, Massachusetts. For those of you who are not familiar with it, the 54th Massachusetts was an all-black regiment raised of former slaves and free blacks in Massachusetts and led by one white officer. They assaulted a Confederate fort in South Carolina, and the white colonel was killed there along with many of the soldiers. They have a historic, proud tradition of defending America. And these idiots destroy that culture. They just don't understand it. People destroy the things they don't understand. When I come to the country, I've gone to the Basotho Cultural Village in Golden Gate, and there I talk about the history of Basotho people. I talk the history of the Afrikaner people, the Boers, and I talk the Trek Boers, and I talk about the Griquas and the Basters who went to Southwest Namibia, and all these people. There's no reason to destroy someone's culture. And as far as what that means, people who can't build destroy. I think that's part of the problem. And it's cultural. And it's not just in South Africa. As I give an example of what happened in America. People want to tear down statues of Robert E. Lee. Why? If you have an alternative figure that you want to promote, put that statue up. You don't wipe out a history, because as a historian, I find it particularly repulsive to do that. Because for good or bad, history occurred, and we should learn from it. And removing the symbols, especially if they're proud cultural symbols of a group of people, is a form of cultural genocide meant to extinguish their heritage. Much like the Anglicization of the world, forcing English. The Basic Education Laws Amendment Act. You must go to school and speak English as a first grader, despite the fact that you're Venda, Xhosa, Zulu, Khoisan, or Afrikaner. Too bad for you. That's an effort to destroy your culture, and it shouldn't happen. As far as SBB, what you're doing is trying to make sure that people can survive. And I think that people need to understand a little bit better.
Wie laat is op?
You sing the anthem now.
Ja, ek dink die manne wat hier's 'n paar van julle wat a few of you will go for OPT afterwards. because you have been sleeping, not listening. Yeah, okay, you know. Chris, one last thing. We are on the point of finishing off. And as usual, it was a great pleasure having you here on stage. There was a lot of questions coming in from the live broadcast, which I'm also grateful for. But I thought, you know, you got now a knife sharpener. I wanted to give you a knife as well. But they might think you want to hijack the plane, so I've kept them the knife. But somebody must just, I or somebody else must show you how to use it.
It looks a little complicated.
But it's very nice and very effective. But I want to give you also something, and this is from me and our what does you call a Afrikaner? Business chamber.
Business chamber.
Yeah. The SBB recently formed business chamber. We have started making our own money, coins, all in silver and gold. But you are not allowed to take any silver or gold out of the country. So we have decided we will give you a copper coin. But it's very nice and I think you will enjoy it. It's called the Zeeland Onyx. And this is 1 ounce of copper. One day, and we will, Peter, who is the chairman of the business chamber, he will show you the rest of the coins. The silver ones as well. He wants to discuss something with you concerning the coins. I think maybe we should send Donald Trump one. But maybe we should put a small diamond in your mouth. Or we decide this, the bull. But anyway, Chris, I want to give this to you. Thank you very, very much for everything. It made the Springboks do better than last Saturday. You can have the last word, Chris.
Well, that's very kind. And normally I'd probably spend a long time up here, but we need to get to the game. So, I really do appreciate everyone's interest in what I have to say. It's very humbling. Wherever I go in South Africa, I'm greeted by folks, even in places like Beaufort West. Who would have guessed that? It's amazing. And I really enjoyed coming up here to Upington, and when we've done it in Pretoria, it's been nice too. I do wish you all the very best in what you're trying to do to protect others and help others from what might be coming. If it never comes, then you will prepare. And that's what soldiers do. You prepare just in case for the possibility. So thank you so much for your hospitality. And I'm going to go out on a limb. Springboks by 10 tonight. They better win or I'm going to be very angry because my anchor event for this tour was rugby's greatest rivalry, and we haven't won a single game, including the provincial sides. Although the Lions gave it a good effort. Yeah, it was a heck of a game. It was lekker. So thank you all so much. For those who asked questions that we didn't get to this afternoon, my apologies for that online. I will do a broadcast later tonight. If you come to my stream, and that's not just to get more viewers and likes, although that also works out well, it will be to answer your questions as best I can if you didn't get a chance to get it in today. So you'll get a second bite of the apple, and I'll try to answer your questions tonight. So bye-bye, donkey. Until the next time, I wish you all the very best. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Chris. Just one last thing before you go out. Johan will be at the door to do a score prediction. It's 50 Rand prediction on the way out. You've got a document there, just you'll fill it in. And then there's a prize for the winner after the game. Johan, thank you. They'll get you at the door. And then we'll move through to the courtyard. There we will watch the rugby and there's drinks in the bar. Yeah, we'll talk together and catch up. Thank you.